Hey, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. So today I want to make a video on things my father did, and if you watch this YouTube channel, you know it's a series of videos, and so I just kind of, as a victim of a sociopath or the son of a sociopath, I pick out these kind of like memories I have that are kind of influential, that are like a whole of events or occurrences in my life that my father did to me or just kind of did in general, which had a significant impact, right? And they're just kind of in there, and I just kind of pick them out and like express them. And it's meant to be a story or something that's relatable to a victim of a sociopath. So basically, one thing my father did right before, now I'm like living separately in Tbilisi, Georgia, but one of the things that he did right before I left is we're having a lot of fights. And I would just like, it was just like crazy to me. I would be like, over the last 10 years, you have not followed through on a single promise or followed through or fulfilled a single context that we've negotiated. And see, like I've pointed that out to my little sister often because we never often had conversations, but the one or two times we did over the last 3 or 4 years, I would try to be like, look, this is what happens. This is the pattern of behavior where my dad and me agreed to something, and based upon those presuppositions, where I'm going to have this type of financial resource for this duration, for this purpose, I try to enact a process. And when the financial input doesn't come into the process, I'm unable to enact it. Right? That makes completely rational sense. And every time, like with my father, like he would be like, this is the reason I can't get the resource to you. I would solve that problem, and then it would be something else. And after I did that a couple of times, the context would, obviously time would have passed, and the context would no longer be remembered or adhered to. So this last series of fights I was having with my dad, I kept like, because like if you're familiar with sociopathic and narcissistic dynamics, they inhibit the expression of the truth. They don't want you to say it, and when you do say it, it's a fight. It's this huge thing. You've been such a bad person for speaking the truth. And so what would happen is, um, every time I would be like, you haven't kept a single promise, you haven't fulfilled a single context that we've negotiated, they would look at me all arrogant and like, yeah, then how do you afford to live? Right? Like, how have you been affording to live? And the thing is, like, it's so enraging because like my father has committed 4,500 a month so that I could become like 150K making a year data scientist over 2 years, right? And for me, when it's such a large sum, I'm like, oh, that's like my inheritance, that's like my part of everything, and then I'll be financially independent. Great, let's invest it into this process. But when you promise 4,500 a month, but you're delivering like 5 or 600 or 1,000 to 1,200, that's a huge difference, and that's like an extreme context. That was like the last one of the final contexts that we kind of negotiated. It was like an extreme one. Usually it's like 2,000 a month or like $10,000 total or something like that, and given our financial kind of background to our family, it's not really that much. And so what my father would do is, and they wouldn't acknowledge it, and it's so crazy, they would not acknowledge the fact that if you do not fulfill the context that we've negotiated with you, or you don't give the financial input into the process that we've agreed to enact together, I will not be able to enact the process, right? Because with my father, his only input was financial and my input was the rest of it, so obviously his thing sets me up to do the other thing. Like, it's like Scottie Pippen passing the ball to Michael Jordan or something, right? You need both parts of it, otherwise it can't be done. The goal cannot be achieved. You cannot make the basket. It just doesn't work. And like I've been pushing this, like I've been articulating this and saying it to my family, to my uncles and my aunts, and going like, that's kind of like the Islamic manner where you reach out to your family, you go to your closest relatives first, and then your furthest relatives, and then you go out into the community and you try to talk to people who live in the community to try to get them to influence them. But for 10 years, but literally 17 years, and before that he used to do it to my mom too, right? So this is who he is. But over the 17 years, not once has he fulfilled a context or come through on a promise once. And that has huge opportunity cost for me, right? Like he will manipulate you and enslave you and get you to agree to a context and make your life go by over a year or two where he's not fulfilling the context, but it seems like he will, and he's making it seem like he might just do it in a second. And and he makes your life go by. And I won't get into how it's really enslavement, like ironclad enslavement. I won't go into that right now, but the fact that my family, none of them, not my brother, not my sister, not my maternal uncle, not my maternal aunts, not their husbands, none of them, not my father's brothers, none of them are willing to acknowledge that if my father has failed to follow through in putting his input that he's committed to out of his own free will, that we freely negotiated, and he's made seem like it's so easy for him to do and it's not a problem, because I'm a compassionate person. I always make sure that it's something that's feasible, that's viable, it's something he can do, but he's agreed to, and he's not putting that input into the process, that it's impossible for me to enact the process without him doing that. And that the time that goes by in him repeatedly doing that, and the opportunity costs that occur, or that accrue, over him doing this for 17 years, he has at least some responsibility to make up or compensate or make it right, or to do the right thing, and at least set me up with a single opportunity where I can be in a place where I feel like, okay, he fucked over my 20s and my 30s, and my early 30s and my late teens, and at least now in my 30s I've come to a place where I can have a decent or substantial life going forward, right? Like, and given our financial background and my father having $120,000 a year business, like all this is, and then before that it used to be like a $250,000 business for a while, and all my uncles and aunts benefited from it, all my cousins benefited from it, and they're all kind of like set up in their own places. So it's like either him by himself or my paternal family in general needs to contribute and get me to the place I need to be, you know and there's no acknowledgement of that whatsoever, that my father not following through on context or not fulfilling a promise, ha- in that on which a process of achieving something is dependent, means that he's sabotaging that process over and over and over again. Anyways, that's it for now. I'll talk to you later. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.